Some teens want to grow up too quickly for their own good.
I like you.
And they won't let anyone stand in their way.
So we're doing this so well.
A lovesick girl wants her boyfriend more than grandma.
The only way that we're going to keep this love going is to eliminate Betty.
A lethal alliance turns a straight-A student into a dangerous dropout.
I hate it here.
Nakisha went from being a Girl Scout to a bad scout.
And daddy's little princess becomes mommy's predator.
People don't die quickly. They will put up a struggle.
These deadly women trade their school books for brutality. They are mean teens. The rural community of Saugerties in the Hudson Valley, New York, 1993. Betty Gardner is mom and dad to her two granddaughters, 12-year-old Wendy and 10-year-old Kathy.
She loved them. Everyone around said they were well-fed, well-clothed, well-educated.
That's lovely and neat.
Betty believes children need love and discipline in equal doses.
Grams, my results.
She was very strict with the children.
She lived by the old adage, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Oh my, all A's and B's.
Grandma's efforts pay off. The girls excel in school and music, especially Wendy.
She was an overachiever, a kid to watch as she went into middle school and then into high school.
She was doing her homework, she was playing soccer, she was playing the flute.
In the summer of 1994, young Wendy's life turns upside down when she connects with a local boy, 15-year-old James Evans.
He was 6'2", 175 pounds. He was known as a bully in the neighborhood. He constantly was in trouble with the police.
He certainly was a rebellious teenager, almost the cliche of a rebellious teenager.
Wendy is drawn to the wild boy.
Wendy was ripe for the pickings for anyone to come along, especially a young boy, and show her attention.
Hey, wanna go for a walk?
Things suddenly sparked between them, and the world totally changed for Wendy, and probably for James, too. Wendy went from being a child to suddenly being someone who was the center of somebody else's universe.
Wendy wants to be a rebel, too.
Wendy suddenly blossomed into a young woman. To say that she was sex-starved, I think, would be over-exaggerating, but she was certainly very interested in James.
Come on, you two.
Wendy loves her new look. Betty does not. She sees a mirror image of her own wayward daughter, the girl's mother.
Her mother was an addict and had been a prostitute.
Both Wendy's parents were drug addicts, heroin addicts actually, and alcoholics.
Fortunately, Grandma gets custody of the toddlers and thinks she's rescued them. Now she's worried.
Betty would unfortunately tell Wendy that she was going to end up like her mother.
You don't want to end up like your mother.
She frequently taunted Wendy that she was going to grow up to be just like her wretched mother. That's a real bad thing to say to a kid.
Grandma's perfect little girl is gone. Day and night.
She got this thrill out of turning from a good girl into a bad girl.
Wendy? Wendy, get in here now.
Betty Gardner was alarmed that Wendy was seeing any boy, let alone James.
Where have you been?
It's none of your business.
How dare you?
The once loving relationship is now volatile.
James Evans had some sort of potion that turned her from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde.
The teen lovers are inseparable.
They started having sex when Wendy was still 12 years old. She really liked sex. They had sex once or twice a day for the whole time they were together. Their relationship was like Velcro. Once they attach to each other, they're attached to each other completely.
I need pee.
I'll come too.
Betty repeatedly did things to try to keep them apart.
You're not going.
You can't do anything.
I can put you in care.
Betty finally realized that she just couldn't deal with Wendy on her own. And so she started looking for help.
Betty turns to the New York family courts. She wants Wendy declared a person in need of supervision.
It's an extreme step. It's a very big step for someone who's raised a child for 10 years.
Wendy's grandmother is essentially saying, I give up, I can't control her. That would mean Wendy would be taken out of the house.
She thought that it was going to be the end of her relationship with James.
Wendy will never let that happen. 1994, the rural community of Saugerties, New York. For a decade, Betty Gardner raises her daughter's children, 13-year-old Wendy and her younger sister, Kathy, 11.
I don't think that she realized how big a responsibility it was going to be.
Betty's relationship with Wendy hits rock bottom when the local rebel, 15-year-old James Evans, comes on the scene.
Sometimes young girls are attracted to the bad boys because that allows them to be bad as well. And that's exciting for them.
At Christmas, Wendy runs away to James's home. As a token of Christmas spirit, Wendy calls her grandma to let her know where she is.
Hey, Grams. Merry Christmas. I'm at James's. Is it okay if I stay here again tonight?
This is not acceptable to her. She told her to come home.
I'm staying here no matter what you say.
This did not make for a merry Christmas time.
What had been a terrible relationship with her grandmother, it just goes into a totally different dimension. And she starts talking to James about what they can do.
The brooding teens now plot their next move. They start crazy talk about murder.
Just want to kill her so bad.
If I kill her...
They talked about it for 3 solid days. She egged them on.
But I don't think you'll do it.
On a bet.
They kind of reinforced each other as they discussed the possibility of killing Wendy's grandmother.
December 28th. The teens pay Betty a belated Christmas visit.
Wendy went over, turned off the TV.
What's going on here?
Shut up.
Get out of my house.
So we're doing this as well.
Just do it.
Little sister Kathy is dragged upstairs.
The last thing Kathy saw was her grandmother with James Evans' hands around her neck.
To drown out the sound of her grandmother dying, Wendy started singing Jingle Bells.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Wendy Gardner didn't try to stop him. Just think about hearing noises coming from a woman who's being strangled and not doing anything about it. He took a kite string, wrapped it around her neck, and put his foot on the back of her neck to hold her head down, and pulled and pulled and pulled until she started bleeding.
Is it done?
Yeah, she's gone.
With Betty out of the way, the teens take control of the eyewitness.
That's when they started threatening Kathy. That if she told anyone or she did anything about this, or if she screamed or ran away, they were going to kill her too.
James and Wendy drag Grandma's body to the garage and dump it in the trunk of Betty's car. Then celebrate in the most macabre way.
They did something very strange.
I think the fact that Wendy and James were able to have sex right at the crime scene tells me that they just didn't give a damn.
For the next 3 days, the murderous duo goes shopping with Grandma's money in her car.
I don't know what James and Wendy were thinking in those next couple of days, but they certainly weren't thinking of getting away with the crime. Grandma was in the trunk.
Kathy is never out of their sight.
They threatened Kathy. They said to her,
How's it feel to be with two murderers?
the little girl was terrified.
Early in the morning of New Year's Eve, Kathy gets a chance to escape.
Kathy wakes up and realizes that everybody else is asleep. And she's a brave, brave kid because she managed to get out of the house and run over to a neighbor's house. That was the beginning of the end.
Horrified neighbors call the police, and soon Wendy tells all.
She goes through detail after detail. It was cold-hearted. It was blood-curdling. It was no remorse. It was just horrible.
In July 1997, James Evans is convicted of second-degree murder. He is sentenced to 9 years to life in prison and is eligible for parole in August 2013.
James did the deed, but Wendy put the string in his hand.
I don't think James Evans would have ever killed Betty Gardner if it wasn't for Wendy.
In February 1997, the jury agrees. Wendy Gardner is also found guilty of second-degree murder. Her sentence, a minimum of 7 years, 10 months.
This was not a crime of passion. Wendy killed the one person in the world on whom she was dependent for shelter, food, love, and care.
In 2004, at the age of 23, Wendy is released. Some believe she's grown out of her problems and is a changed woman.
Wendy Gardner worked very hard on rehabilitating herself and tried to become a contributing member of society. I don't think that we should have to fear her anymore.
Others have their doubts.
Wendy, I would never trust. I would never trust her. She's got a bad seed in her.
When teenage angst boils over,
But I hate it here.
What it says to me is rage. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you.
And finds a willing accomplice.
She was just trying to help a friend.
Something wicked is sure to follow.
Almost the ultimate act of betrayal. Almost something out of Shakespeare.
Max Meadows, Virginia, a close-knit mountain community.
It's a great place to raise a family. We have good schools. Everybody knows everybody. Violent crime is way out of the norm here.
A perfect place for single mother, 40-year-old Vaughn Thomas.
Cookies and cream or chocolate?
And her daughter, 12-year-old Nakisha Waddell.
I'm thinking both.
By all appearances, she did have a normal family life.
In fact, she had a rather good one.
There you go.
Everyone's crazy about this movie.
I hope it's funny.
She was a Girl Scout and a good girl.
In 2002, Nakisha has everything going for her, except her size.
Nakisha was a large girl. She was probably close to 6 feet tall. I think other kids picked on her, made fun of her at school because she was so big.
Being the target of bullies takes an emotional toll. Nakisha is soon an unhappy girl.
And she ended up hanging out with people that just accepted her.
Don't worry about them.
She finds a friend and protector
I'm Annie.
in 15-year-old Annie Belcher.
You could tell that she had more of a deviant mentality than Nakisha.
Lonely Nakisha latches on to Annie and her idea of fun.
What?
Don't want me, open the door.
But Nakisha's mom feels she's losing her daughter.
What are you two up to?
Nothing. The only thing you allow me to do?
Vaughn was a loving mother. They was actually pretty close up until the time she started running with Annie Belcher. Annie and Nakisha both had some problems at school. Their grades had began to slip. It was suspected that they were beginning to use some illegal drugs.
By the age of 14, Nakisha is no longer the outgoing achiever. She's a disobedient dropout.
You can't lie here all day.
Why?
Her mother did discipline her. She wasn't beaten or anything of that nature, but her mistakes were pointed out to her.
It's not unusual for teenage girls, especially between 13 and 17, to have a lot of conflict with their mom. It usually gets worked out one way or the other. Not this time.
Angry with her mom, Nakisha fantasizes her absent dad can solve her problems.
Nakisha did have contact with her biological father. There may have been some perceived resentment from Vaughn that she was talking to her biological father too much.
It's not unusual for a teenager who's having trouble with a single parent that they're living with to fantasize how wonderful life would be with the other parent. But that almost never works out.
Nakisha's fixation with her dad fuels the fire between mother and daughter.
I want to move in with Dad.
Absolutely not.
But I hate it here.
He left you when you were a baby.
When her mother said, Your father never wanted you. It was more than she could bear. And it destroyed her fantasy, and she wanted to destroy her mother for saying it.
You don't understand.
Teenage anger is common, but the rage Nakisha feels is not.
I think it was just a lot of anger built up in her. Really a lot of anger over the course of the last year or two.
And it was more than Nakisha could take.
Max Meadows, Virginia, is a quiet mountain community. But in the spring of 2004, there is no peace in Vaughn Thomas's home. Her 14-year-old daughter, Nakisha Waddell, is going through the terrible teens. Nakisha seeks comfort online and meets her very first boyfriend.
He's a hunk, right?
She did not know this guy. She'd never seen this guy. But Nakisha spent a fair amount of time on the computer with this individual.
And she wanted to go visit with him, and her mother wouldn't allow her to do so because she was 14 years old.
How much money have you got?
Like 100?
Yeah. I guess Victor will pay for things.
Yeah.
But Nakisha is determined to go. She just needs to clean up a few loose ends.
And that's when they pretty much waited on the mother to come home.
On May 28, 2004,
Have you thought about this afternoon?
she says goodbye to her mom
A little bit?
for the last time.
Are you excited? Oh, you scared me. Why aren't you at school?
Once he came in the door and found out that she had not gone to school that day, they got in a verbal argument there.
Because I'm running away.
You are ruining your life.
The weapon was a large hunting knife. It's quite long in length.
You don't know anything.
The victim retreated out into the yard, stabbed some more. Stabbings and cuttings are intensely personal crime. You have to be right up and smell the breath of the person that you're stabbing.
She's put about probably 30-some more stab wounds into her. And I think that came from all the anger built up in her. And she just wanted to make sure she was dead.
43 stab wounds is 42 more than is necessary to kill someone. What it says to me is rage. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you.
Friend Annie, hiding in the house during the murder, now helps clean up the mess.
Let's take her to the shed.
The two girls dragged the body into an outbuilding at the rear of the property and covered it up with trash.
Nakisha thought a lot about killing her mom, but she didn't think about what to do afterwards. That part eluded her.
The body is one problem. The other is a convincing story.
We should make it look like a burglary.
A rather poor imitation of a burglary. Burglars generally don't ransack and smash things.
Nakisha and Annie start a plan. They have no idea how to finish.
The plan was thought out, but disposing of the body was not. They were amateurs. They panicked.
The next morning, Nakisha decides she needs a final resting place for her mother, Vaughn. They try to cremate her with nail polish remover. When that doesn't work, they resort to a crude, shallow grave.
There were just a few logs and sticks lying across it. You could actually see flesh protruding from the grave. It was exposed to the air. The grave was that shallow.
Nakisha hides out at Annie's house. After 2 days, Vaughn's family is missing her. They call the police. This isn't a long investigation for Lieutenant Doug Tuck once he tracks down the victim's daughter.
I said, well, I need to know what's going on. We're trying to find your mother, Vaughn. And she looked at me and she said, she's dead. I killed her. And I said, would you please say that again? It sort of stunned me a little bit. I said, you're saying you killed her? She said, she's dead. I killed her. I buried her in the backyard. I didn't see any tears whatsoever. I was expecting her to break down and show some kind of emotion. She did not do that.
She wasn't sorry for what she had done to her mother. She was worried that she was going to go to jail.
Both teen girls are tried as adults. Accomplice Annie Welcher pleads guilty to second-degree murder and is sentenced to 26 years, with 11 years suspended.
I saw the girls on the day of the trial and still did not show a lot of remorse that I can remember. But
Nakisha Waddell pleads guilty to first-degree murder. In June 2005, she is given a 70-year sentence with 35 years suspended. She is eligible for release in 2038. So what made a 14-year-old girl slay her mother in such a brutal fashion? The tiny community of Max Meadows can still barely understand it.
the most shocking part of this crime to me was that there was no really clear motive, that there had been a few arguments up until this happened, but why would you commit a crime this horrific against your mother without having one specific event?
I think Nakisha was motivated to kill her mother at that moment out of anger. But the premeditation was that she simply wanted a better life and thought her mother was the cause of her problems.
When teenage brilliance.
A very bright, manipulative psychopath.
Turns bad.
It shows anger, it shows hatred, it shows total disregard.
No one can stop the wrath.
It was a horrific, horrific time inside that house.
In 1995, 19-year-old Gina Grant is accepted to Harvard, the most prestigious university in the United States.
Gina Grant, cheerleader, first female president of her class. Huh, brilliant.
It's an outstanding achievement and fulfills a promise to her dad.
See, Dad, you knew I could do it.
Her journey to Harvard begins in Lexington, South Carolina.
I'm playing her mirror. I already know her lines. What a dream is here.
Dad Charles has grand plans for his precocious princess.
You'll study it hard. It's the best, and you're the best.
Gina was a very popular young girl. She was very likable, extremely intelligent, very, very bright.
But Dad won't see his daughter's achievements. He dies of cancer before Gina's 12th birthday. The loss of her husband is too much for Gina's mom, Dot.
When her father died of cancer, it seemed to throw the family into a downward spiral. She had a good job. She seemed to be a normal type of person. But when she went home, people said she drank, and she drank a lot.
She had a lot of problems after his death. Emotionally, physically, it worked on her a great deal.
Gina isn't old enough to understand or help Mom.
Turn that down!
It's not my fault you got a hangover.
But she throws herself into being the best at everything.
She was athletic. I think she played basketball, played tennis on the cheerleading squad.
Did you see Sal?
Yeah, I know. What a joke.
Then Gina meets someone who changes her life forever.
Yeah, that was so good. Isn't that new guy?
15-year-old Jack Hook is hardly Ivy League.
Ready to go when you are.
Jack was not a person that you'd want your daughter dating.
Troublemaker, petty thief. Not the ideal couple.
Gina takes Jack home to meet Mom.
Mom, this is Jack.
I think she chose this boy to upset her mother. The bad boy.
There was a difficult relationship there between Gina and her mother over the relationship with her boyfriend, Jack.
He's bad news.
I like him.
Well, you better start to unlike him.
Probably Gina's mother was right. She shouldn't have been with Jack.
But Gina's determined to see Jack and sneaks out whenever she can.
Where have you been? Why do you care?
Gina even gets more brazen, sneaking Jack into the family home.
She'd take her dog outside for a walk. And depending on what she said, Jack would know if the coast was clear or not for him to come into the house.
And this set the mother off. She didn't like that. And she tried to stop it. She tried to terminate it, put an end to it, see that it never happened again.
We're talking about a 14-year-old girl here, sneaking a boy in to spend the night. Of course Gina's mom would be upset by that. Wouldn't anybody be?
I think that boy became more important to her than anything. And that meant Mom might have to go.
1990, in Lexington, South Carolina. 14-year-old Gina Grant is in a standoff with her mom over her delinquent boyfriend. And her mom's taste for alcohol fuels Gina's antagonism.
I think her mom's behavior might have even embarrassed her.
September 13th, 1990. By nightfall, Dot is already drunk, and her focus is fuzzy. She's a sitting duck for a daughter hell-bent on death.
People don't die quickly. They will put up a struggle. The human body tries valiantly to stay alive. You get bloody. You feel the victim.
Gina's mother was beaten in the back of the head, in the front of the head, all over her arms as she was trying to defend herself.
The fact that there were 13 blows tells us the killer was venting her rage on her mother. Once she started striking her, she couldn't stop.
She could have been pounding rocks, but it was her mother's head.
The straight-A student doesn't flee or hide the body. She has a plan and calls boyfriend Jack to help.
And what's her plan here? Well, that her mother committed suicide.
Gina convinces Jack to thrust a knife into her dead mom's neck.
So much so that you can't pull that knife out of the neck without lifting the lady's body off the floor.
After Jack leaves, Gina calls the police and tries to sell her story of a tragic suicide.
I don't know what happened. She was just acting crazy, and then she had this knife in her hand.
And there she is on the floor with this knife in her neck and with a hand around the handle of the knife, as if someone wanted the officers to think that this woman had plunged that knife into her own neck. That's totally implausible.
The injuries Dot sustained could not have been caused by falling down a carpeted stairs. Basically, the crime scene didn't fit Gina's story.
But Gina thinks she's smarter than the police.
And she is toe-to-toe, nose-to-nose with these officers.
She fell down these stairs, and then...
She's not giving in. She's an intelligent young woman. She's a conniving young woman. She's a devious young woman.
When the evidence contradicts her, Gina just changes her story.
Oh yeah, she says. Let me tell you how it actually happened. And that is the telltale sign of what? A liar.
Gina then tries to blame boyfriend, Jack. But all the evidence points to a daughter brutally taking her mom's life.
Finally, the officers say, "You're not going home tonight. You're going to stay here in jail because we're charging you with murder."
It's then Gina introduces a new defense. She claims mom's abusive.
The strange thing is, Gina didn't share this information with anybody. So she was either keeping it all in or making it all up.
I don't recall anything in our investigation that indicated any violence or abusive behavior by either one of the two.
Gina Grant and Jack Hook appear before the family court in South Carolina. Jack pleads no contest to accessory after the fact to voluntary manslaughter and spends less than a year in juvenile detention. Gina pleads no contest to voluntary manslaughter. Her time behind bars to be decided by the State Juvenile Parole Board.
An indeterminate sentence to the juvenile prison, not to exceed your 21st birthday.
But just months after being locked up, Gina is out. A judge accepts her family's pleas that she would be better off attending a special school for troubled teens in Boston, close to family support.
They were down in South Carolina saying, we will help, we will help, we will help. Once they get to Massachusetts, within 6 weeks, they don't want anything to do with Gina Grant. And they wash the hands of them. The system up there doesn't do anything, and she's out living on her own. Not serving a sentence, but living on her own.
Gina spends less than a year in custody for killing her mom.
Gina beat the system. Gina manipulated the system. The system failed in this case.
You gotta ask yourself, what is a human life worth when all you serve is months in jail for it?
Four years later, Gina gets the green light for Harvard.
In her application, she makes the claim that she's an orphan.
A teen orphan living on her own, achieving a place at Harvard, makes the newspapers.
Somebody sends Harvard newspaper clippings of what really happened. Once that happened, everything goes wild. It's an explosion. Well, what do we got here? What do we got on our hands? Harvard reaches a decision to withdraw their offer to let her attend.
Gina was smart enough to get into one of the finest universities in the world, but she wasn't smart enough to be truthful on the application. And that's what ultimately hurt her.
These deadly women were callous kids. Wendy Gardner used her love to get rid of Grandma. Nakisha Waddell said, "I hate you" 43 times with Annie Belcher's blessing. And Gina Grant unleashed her rage on the one who loved her most. None showed any mercy. They were mean teens.